Hi and welcome to the channel. Flash sale time for Indicator has come around, and as somebody who owns of the Indicator titles, I thought I might be a good person to recommend you some titles that are in there. Now, while I own them all, that doesn't mean I've seen them all, because, like, you know, what kind of sane collector has seen all of his collection? But I have seen quite a bit of it, and I do have a collecting goal or a watching goal to see them all before the end of the year, making good progress on it. And with that in mind, I've seen a lot of movies and I'd like to recommend you some. So let's go through some quickly and I'll give you a brief synopsis. Some of them are older titles, some of them are more recent titles. I'm actually not sure where their cut-off's going to be for the sale, but I've tried to pick some stuff that isn't too recent so that maybe you'll get a good idea. The first one that I'm going to recommend to you is Spine number 8, and it's Bunny Lake is Missing. These kind of limited editions, ones of them are long gone, but this is still a great film to watch. And it basically tells the story of a young woman who loses her child, Bunny Lake, obviously, and nobody seems to believe her. She goes missing from school. Nobody remembers to have seen her, pretends to have seen her at all, and you're left as if you're wondering whether the mother's crazy, whether it's even happened, and if that's true, then what will happen to her. I think it's a suspenseful, twistful tale that kind of goes a lot of different ways, and I think it's a lot of fun to watch, even if the subject matter is quite uncomfortable for a lot of it. I struggle a lot with those kind of missing children because you can't help but empathise and think of your own children in that scenario and whether that would be something you'd want to do or watch. But yeah, Bunny Lake is Missing. Terrific start. Next one up is a filmmaker who I just adore, and while a lot of his films that I've seen recently are very much of the place and of the humour that he's from, Bill Forsyth's Housekeeping I think is terrific. I mean, this cover says a lot. We have a central character, a female, who takes in 2 kids that are nieces, and who lives in a house, and let's just say she's not house proud. I mean, she's not bothered. She collects tin cans and newspapers, and the house floods, and you can see they just sit in the house that's flooding. In a lot of ways, they're not worried about that, and it's really about whether she's a fit role model for these 2 girls and where they fit in society. They're seen as oddballs in society. But as the film sort of goes to explore, interesting people are really the spice of life, and you kind of want and root for it all to work out because they're all interesting characters. And Bill Forsyth's ability to write interesting characters is at the very core of what makes him a great filmmaker to watch. Even the filmmakers that inspired and the stories that inspired. Like, if you haven't seen any of his Scottish films, I mean, they're obviously just terrific. Greggy's Girl, you know, Local Hero, etc. They're all terrific. The Bill Forsyth films are brilliant. Plus you get a nice lengthy interview with Bill Forsyth here. I think it's by its own right that's worth the price alone. Housekeeping, I think, is a lot of fun. Oddball movie for sure, but Bill Forsyth's movies are all kind of oddball. I thought it might be worth recommending some of these. Now, I could have grabbed all of these if I'm being truthful, because the Hammer box sets have obviously been very successful for Indicator, and you know, while the boxes themselves are gone, this is volume 2, the individual titles are on sale by themselves, and to leave out the box sets of the titles within the box sets I think would be a bit silly, but I'd like you to recommend some of the single titles because they'll be on, you know, even cheaper indeed. And I thought I would do volume 2 because, you know, I think it's the most easily accessible that's in. Each volume has got kind of a theme to it. This one's very much crime. It's in it, as you can see, from the dogs and the police chasing, and a couple of them are well worth pointing out. I mean, the highlight I think is Catching the Man, which is very much about a bank robbery. It has Peter Cushing in it, and it's just terrific. It's suspenseful. Are they going to get away with it? It's clever how they set up and they pull off the bank heist, etc. And I think it's very well written and very well put together and executed. And the other one I'd like to put out about him, I mean, I've talked about Never Take Sweets from a Stranger before, and the full treatment that are in here as well. It's a great movie. Again, I've just talked about a child goes missing or child snatching or otherwise. That's kind of the theme of that one. But I'll talk about the Snorkel, because the Snorkel I think is a good murder whodunit kind of film where you know kind of what happens, but you're trying to work out how, and that's where the premise of the film comes about. Can you work out how it was done and how does it involve a snorkel, etc.? Is the bad guy going to get away with it? I think it was great fun to watch as well, and you know, these Hammer releases that come with the Women of Hammer featurettes, you know, all of the stuff that comes with them, you can't miss on any of these, if I'm perfectly honest. You could go for the full treatment, you could go for Never Take Sweets from a Stranger. They're all very good, but if I'm going to pick two from that box, those are the two that I would recommend, and that are the most easily accessible, I think it's fair to say, for that set, because being crime stories, everybody's seen a crime procedural, everybody's seen a crime film, so it's an easy one to get into without having to worry about, God, will I like the Hammer horror? I think if you are going for Hammer horror and you're worried that it'll be scary, those films aren't scary anymore, but I think they're good fun all the same. Next one up is a Joe Mankiewicz film, written by Tennessee Williams. It's Suddenly Last Summer, starring Montgomery Clift and Elizabeth Taylor and Katharine Hepburn, of course, that's in it. I think this is an absolutely brilliant film. It's a story that tells of Elizabeth Taylor primarily, who's in a mental institution. She's been sent there to be looked after by her family and being lobotomized or otherwise, and is she going crazy? Can we save her? It's got the location of deep South America. There's a whole whirlwind of stuff that goes along. You've got Montgomery Clift, this the man's been supposed to treat her. Is everybody crazy in this film? Is the heat contributing, the climate contributing to what's going on? I think it's a real moody piece. It's reminiscent in that kind of using that heat, except for something like Streetcar Named Desire. I think that kind of plays in it without kind of being the same film or otherwise. Montgomery Clift isn't quite Marlon Brando or otherwise. Elizabeth Taylor is the crazed version of Vivien Leigh. So, you know, you can kind of put those bits if you want, but Joseph Mankiewicz was a great director. Tennessee Williams wrote some great plays. I think Suddenly Last Summer is one to definitely check out. Next one up, Dragon Wick. Dragon Wick with Gene Tierney and Vincent Price and Walter Hewson and Glenn Langan. Dragon Wick tells the story of Gene Tierney, who's taken away from her family to go and live with the rich man who's taken away to look after her because she's a young pretty thing. But it's in this basically haunted house, this Dragon Wick estate. And there's more going on there in the history than people are letting on. And she being this sweet, innocent young thing, will she survive how overbearing this place is? Never mind the people that are in. I think Dragon Wick's great fun as well. A black and white film that has loads of tension and is very much reminiscent of the sweeping Hollywood themes that are in there, where, you know, the location you're taken to and transported to is as important as the story itself, and you're caught up in that world. I think Dragon Wick is great. Something a bit more modern, we'll go for Moscow on the Hudson, which has got Robin Williams. Robin Williams is a Russian who's with the Russian jazz orchestra thing. They go on a trip to New York, and he's been sent there with the idea of making sure that his friend doesn't defect. So while making sure that his friend doesn't defect, Robin Williams defects himself, and he decides that he wants to be American. He's talked in a department store, and it's then the story about him trying to defect and integrate himself into American culture. I think it's great fun. Robin Williams, it's straight kind of performance. He's somewhat humorous, but it's not the intention of the film itself. But lots of fun to be had in Moscow on the Hudson. Very light watching, directed by Paul Mazursky as well. And yeah, a really good fun of a film. I assume this is going to be in the sale. It might not make it. It might be in the cutoff. But Valdez Horses, also known as Chino, is Charles Bronson vehicle. There was a couple came out at that time, as well as Valachi papers came out the same month. So either this and Valachi will be in or they won't. If it's not, keep an eye out for this. It's Charles Bronson plays a gruff outsider who raises the best looking and best groomed horses in the land. But he's an outsider. But because it's a Charles Bronson film, his wife Jill Ireland's got to be in it. And she's young, she's pretty. She's got to be involved in the story somehow. You can put two and two together there in some ways. He's the gruff outsider. She's the young pretty daughter of the wealthy other person there. The two of them fall for each other maybe, and it's not exactly popular. But I think there's a lot of style in this. Even if I would say Charles Bronson is the most charismatic, you know, person to watch on screen, but he has a presence. So it could be argued that that's its own charisma, but it's not a welcoming charisma. It's very much just a presence on screen, and I think he's dynamite to watch. I think you know what you're getting with Bronson every time you see him, and he's somebody that I think you can gravitate to every time that happens. And then I'm going to finish with 2 black and white films. So I've got Spring Night, Summer Night, which I talked about the watch list many times ago as a film that basically tells of rural America and the lives of small town. It's not a very long film, but it's incredibly stylish. It's one of those films that has been purported to be made for buttons and yet looks as beautiful as anything you'll ever see on film. I think again it's really stylish. I think it's a really interesting watch. I think it's something that if you want to get an insight into other films that were made in America other than the big blockbuster that was around at the time, like this is from '67, and very much in the realms of independent cinema in 1967, just before the BBS series of the Dennis Hopper and Jack Nicholson, Easy Rider, Last Picture Show, all of those kind of things came out. This is small independent cinema, and I think it's a real style, and it has a kind of interesting story to tell, but I think it's very much more style over substance, but that style is well worth checking out, and I think really, really terrific. And then the last one I'm going to talk about is, unusually for Indicator, it's not an English film originally. It was a Czech film, although it's been overdubbed in English, so it's presented as an English film. There's 2 versions on the disc, and it's 90 degrees in the shade. I nearly said 50 degrees. I was going to say that's not very warm, but 90 degrees in the shade, and it basically tells the story of 2 people trying to get on together in difficult circumstances, so to speak, and the heat of both the place that they're in and the heat of the people around them kind of cause them to have some sort of difficulties, and how they deal with it. And yeah, terrific release, and one that I thoroughly enjoyed. It was one of those things that seemed to be a curiosity, but it's very much what some of us like to say is an indicator release of something that you never heard of. You watched it, about halfway through you're like, I'm not sure if I'm really enjoying this. You get to the end and you go, it's touched like a little corner of your heart somewhere, and that's really gravitated on to a part of my soul, and something that I'm really quite taken by. And as a little bonus, let's throw one more into this one. This one's a bit of an oddity because it's a Paul Newman film, but it's not a Paul Newman acted film. It's a Paul Newman produced and directed film, and it is the effects of gamma rays on the Man in the Moon marigolds, and it stars his wife Joanne Woodward. And what's really interesting about this, it's very much a family drama. I mean, I could see how some people would say there's not much happens in this film, but it's very much about how you deal with bringing up a child in difficult circumstances by yourself, when you're a mother by yourself, and you've got pressures, you're not doing so well yourself, and your child, you're trying to encourage them to grow and succeed and be better than what you can give them. And again, like I've said just there, it grabs onto a certain part of your soul. I think there's something very true and very warming about this, even though Joanne Woodward's character's a bit mad and a bit not in control of herself. She's still at the core of her as a parent that wants to do the best for a kid, even though she can't help herself. And that kind of drama, I think, doesn't get represented an awful lot. It's very much an early depiction of somebody struggling with mental health. And very clearly struggling with mental health, but without judging them and saying this is a bad person. You may kind of wish for better for them. You may wish to think, God, you should be doing better. What the hell's wrong with you? But you can actually see very clearly all the things that they're struggling with. And for that reason, I think this is well worth checking out. I think it's a film that will speak to anybody that's a parent and it struggles with being a parent sometimes. And I think that can be very many of us a lot of times. So there's my brief recommendations. God knows what point it'll cut off to. Maybe some of those will not be in the sale, but I've tried to be selective. I hope you've great fun picking stuff up in the Indicator sale. Very rarely have I ever watched a film and not went, oh God, I really enjoyed that. And even if I didn't really enjoy it the first time, by the time I got to the end of the extras, I was like, no, I get what that film was trying to do. I get why it didn't grab me the first time. It wasn't intended to, and it has smacked me up the face in another way. So have great fun in the sale. Let me know what you've picked up, and I'll speak to you soon. Take care. Bye.